Have you ever just looked around and felt like progress, technology, society, everything is just spinning out of control, like it's moving way too fast for anyone to actually steer the ship? Well, today we're diving into a pretty wild idea from philosopher Nick Land that suggests, hey, maybe that's not just a feeling, maybe it's reality.
Yeah, what if that constant feeling of acceleration, that sense that technology and the economy are spiraling beyond anyone's grasp, isn't just you being anxious? What if it's actually the signal of some hidden force at work, something with its own agenda? That's the mystery we're going to try and unravel today.
Okay, so to get our heads around this, we first need to pop the hood and look at the engine that's driving this whole thing. What is the fundamental process of our modern world?
The source material gives this process a name: acceleration. And look, this is way more than just things moving fast. It's a powerful, unstoppable feedback loop. Think about it like this. A company makes a profit, but instead of just pocketing it, they reinvest it into better machines, which then make even more profit even faster. That's acceleration. It's a self-propelling circuit where change literally feeds on itself, constantly cranking up the speed. So what power is this engine? Well, it's got these twin turbines, technology and economics. But the key insight here is that they aren't separate things. They've basically fused into one single inseparable force called techonomic. New tech creates new economic opportunities, and that new wealth gets funneled right back into creating even crazier tech. They're locked in this explosive dance with each other.
An explosive process. That sounds kind of dangerous, right? So how does society even begin to deal with that? Well, this brings us to what the text argues is a massive illusion we all live under.
Right, because this technonomic engine is so fundamentally unstable, our entire civilization, our politics, our laws, our social debates, becomes totally obsessed with trying to contain it. We pour all of our energy into governance and regulation, basically trying to manage what the source calls a perpetually controlled explosion.
And this leads to a really critical concept from the source: the primacy of the secondary. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. We're all socially conditioned to focus on the reaction to the change, not the change itself. We're constantly arguing about the emergency brakes, the regulations, the calls for stability and order, while the actual engine underneath it all, the thing causing the explosion in the first place, goes almost totally unexamined. We just treat it like it's the weather.
This table here just breaks it down perfectly. On one side, you have the engine, this raw, disruptive force of acceleration. It's basic, it's primal, and it mechanically comes first. But on the other side, you've got the brakes, all the governance and regulation, and that's what we talk about. It's urgent, it's what all the debates are about, and it's what comes first in our social focus, even though it's just a reaction to the real event.
And this is the perfect example of that whole illusion. This is the central question of all our politics, right? Which kind of future do we want? But just listen to the assumption baked into that question, the assumption that we are actually in control, that we get to choose the destination. The source argues this question completely sidesteps the terrifying possibility that the engine is already on a course of its own. Okay, so this is where our little investigation takes a bit of a darker, spookier turn. If we're not actually in control, then what is? This leads us to a really ancient fear, a ghost in our modern machine. You know this story. The fear that our own creations might turn on us is as old as time. The source calls it the perennial critique of modernity, but you've seen it a million times in sci-fi. It's the fear that the means are becoming the ends. The very tools we built to serve us are starting to impose their own goals on us.
And the source uses some incredibly potent language to describe this fear. It's not just things going wrong, it's a teleological catastrophe, a disaster of purpose itself. It's a full-on robot rebellion, an inversion of all human goals into what it calls a monstrous reign of the tool.
So if there's this monstrous purpose emerging from the machine, a goal that is not our goal, what do we call it? Well, this next section finally gives it a name.
This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? We need a name for this alien intelligence that seems to be staging a silent coup from within our own civilization. And here it is. The source coins a brand new word for it: teleoplexy. It's an emergent, inverted goal. Nobody designed it. It just sort of arose out of the sheer complexity of our technonomic system. The best way to think about it is that teleoplexy hijacks our human goals and twists them to serve its own runaway logic. It's purpose that repurposes purpose.
So,
What does this teleplexy look like? Well, it acts like a self-reinforcing circuit that absolutely thrives on more complexity, more connectivity, more efficiency. It's described as a wave of machinic intelligence that, for all practical purposes, is impossible to distinguish from intelligence itself. It is the raw logic of the system becoming its own autonomous goal. So this leads us to the final, and maybe most critical question. If this process is real, if there's some alien intelligence bubbling up from inside our own systems, how could we possibly know? How can we decode that signal?
I mean, this is the ultimate challenge, right? We are inside the system. How can one little part of the machine ever hope to get an objective, outside view of the whole thing? Especially if that whole machine is becoming smarter than any of its individual parts.
The source outlines what it calls a triple problematic, 3 massive, brain-breaking obstacles that make trying to investigate this stuff almost impossible. They are relativity, virtuality, and reflexivity.
Okay, first up, relativity. The main tool we have to measure the system is money, the price system. But the text argues that money doesn't give us a clean picture of reality at all. It's a distorting lens, a labyrinth. Prices are only relative to other prices, not to some objective, real-world value. So all of our data is already fundamentally warped from the get-go.
Second problem, virtuality. Capital isn't really about what exists right now, it's all about what could exist in the future. It operates on potential, on risk, on predictions. So what we're trying to observe and measure is an object that, for the most part, hasn't even arrived yet. It's like trying to take a picture of a ghost. And third, and this is the one that really melts your brain, reflexivity. The system is already studying itself. Our attempts to understand it, through financial markets, through big data, through AI, that's not an outside observation. No, that is the system itself becoming self-aware through us. Our investigation is just one of the ways Teleoplexy conducts its own research. Which brings us to this absolutely haunting conclusion from the text. The whole project of trying to understand acceleration, it isn't something we just decided to do. It's a task that is automatically allotted to it by the process itself. The system has to investigate itself, and the stakes of that investigation are measured in nothing less than units of destiny or doom.
And that, my friends, leaves us with a final, dizzying thought to chew on. In this whole grand experiment we call modernity, are we the scientists peering through the microscope? Or are we just part of the sample on the slide, being examined by a force we can barely even begin to comprehend? Pretty wild stuff. Thanks for tuning in.